Flourishing trade is often synonymous with a flourishing economy. In this series, by Let's Scrutinize, we will be scrutinizing the domestic factors affecting India's trade, the external factors affecting India's trade, and the third video, let's keep it a secret for now. In today's video, we'll be exploring the domestic factors that affect India's trade. And you may ask, why are we even concerned about this? And why is it important? Well, you'll find out in the video. And why we are covering this is because this is one of the most undercovered topics on YouTube. India faces significant challenges in the area of trade policy. The global economic slowdown, increase in protectionism, the stalled mega trade deals that could in time well be revived, and perhaps more important, its own domestic preoccupations. For India to achieve its policy objectives, the government and industry, particularly the manufacturing sector, must prepare for opportunities and greater engagement in an evolving multilateral trade arena. India's priorities should include taking policy measures to confirm global standards and supporting the World Trade Organization or the WTO to relaunch multilateral negotiations. According to Singapore's former Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong, Singaporeans don't mind, but I cannot pronounce Singaporean names. India currently has the potential to jumpstart a stagnating global economy, similar to the way China did 10 years ago. But given that India faces massive developmental challenges, is this a realistic assessment? Between 1991 and 2013, India's economy produced only 140 million jobs, a fraction of more than the 300 million required. A comparison to China would be very apt. China has lifted hundreds of millions of its citizens out of poverty, raising per capita income from a mere $873 in 1999 to $8,027 in 2015. The strength of China's manufacturing sector and a favorable global trade policy setting made this remarkable transformation possible. In 1995, when China entered the World Trade Organization, its exports were about $149 billion, with a trade surplus of nearly $20 billion. By 2014, China's exports had risen to a whopping $2.3 trillion, with a surplus of $382 billion. China's economic growth accounted for more than three quarters of global poverty reduction. The biggest question in the mind of any Indian is whether India is capable of performing such similar feats of economic growth and integration into the global economy. Can its manufacturing sector become a major producer of jobs and tradable goods? Can it take advantage of whatever opportunities are thrown at it by this fitfully evolving global trading architecture? Now, let's consider the Trans-Pacific Partnership (TPP) and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership (TTIP). While both have collapsed, they are not only the manifestations of this evolving architecture. Various regional and sub-regional free trade agreements (FTAs) are already in place or likely to evolve. To maximize opportunities within this environment, India will have to overcome significant trade policy challenges, domestic issues, the evolving global situation, and the need for a positive trade policy agenda as perhaps the only viable way for India to enhance its economic relationship with major trading partners like the United States, Japan, Australia, and these also happen to be the members of the Quad. Albeit, the greatest challenge to the development of a strong trade policy in India is its poorly developed manufacturing sector. Although it did grow after India embarked and focused on economic liberation in 1991, the manufacturing share of the gross domestic product has since fallen to 16.2% in 2015 to 2016, about what it was in 1989 to 1990, 16.4%. The question of how to substantially augment the share of manufacturing is a tough one with no easy answers. Constraints include the limited availability of power and land, lack of access to technology, low productivity, the rising cost of labor, and difficulties in doing business. Though progress has been made, it's not all really bad, but it has been insufficient. By far, the most serious impediment to the revival of the manufacturing sector is the scarcity of land. In the past decade, India signed FTAs of free trade agreements with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations (ASEAN). the Republic of Korea, Japan, and Malaysia. However, some insiders admit that India's trade partners have gained more from these agreements than India has. India's experience with regional trade agreements or RTAs has been less satisfactory because of the lack of competitiveness of its manufacturing sector and lack of innovation and investment in such sectors such as textiles, garments, and pharmaceuticals. This has resulted in little enthusiasm for adopting a more activist trade policy within the government, think tanks, and trade policy community. Doubts about attractiveness of international trade agreements grow stronger when global concerns over immigration cause other countries to reject India's demand for freer movement of professionals. Notwithstanding these challenges and doubts, joining RTAs could bring India immeasurable benefits. Perhaps most importantly, it would make the country's goods and services more competitive because it would force Indian industry to adjust to international standards in technical barriers to trade and sanitary and phytosanitary restrictions, an invaluable asset in the long run. Over the years, India has paid insufficient attention to the value of trade policy. Many policy actions that the Bharatiya Janata Party government undertook in 2016, such as enhanced duty drawback scheme, had been suggested all the way back in 1996. It took India 20 years to implement a thing. 20 years. Political paralysis, lack of will, and even perhaps lack of full understanding prevented the required steps from being taken in 1996. Had timely action been taken, India's share of global trade in textiles and clothing would have become much larger. Instead, Bangladesh, China, and Vietnam were the big beneficiaries of the end of the quota regime. Between 2000 and 2014, China's share of global exports rose from 10% to 36% in textiles and from 18% to 39% in garments. Hence, now, for those curious minds who must be wondering, what is a duty drawback scheme? So, a duty drawback scheme allows exporters to get a refund on custom duty paid on imported goods, where those goods are to be treated, processed, or incorporated in other goods for export. In conclusion, let's remember that formulating trade policies the correct way is no easy task, and that's the reason it takes so long. But 20 years is kind of unacceptable, isn't it? In this video, we've tried to cover what India has and can do at the World Trade Organization, what some political leaders have to say about India's growth, how it can grow further. We've given examples of fellow nations who are almost at the same level with India, and we've also given examples of free trade agreements like the TPP and the TTIP. A little teaser for all those who stay till the end of this video. In the next video, we'll be covering a statement given by Mr. Modi in 2016, the Smart City project, the Make in India project, the Skill India program, Digital India, just to name a few. In conclusion, let us all strive to develop well informed opinions.